If a dog is resting on the staircase and someone is trying to maneuver around them, that dog might feel trapped, even though they're not. They might feel trapped. And they might have feelings about someone encroaching on that space. And then any area where a preferred caretaker is and the dog wants proximity to them. I see this happen quite a bit with my clients who have families and who have dogs and kids. It doesn't make sense to the caretakers in the home. They don't understand why their dog, they're like, but they could just move away. They can just move away from the baby as they're crawling towards them. The dog may not want to, or the kitty may not want to move away because they want proximity to the preferred caretaker. They have that bond. They're comfortable near that person. They see that person as a safe space. And so they may just want proximity to that person. And so they don't move away, even though they have space to do it.
Welcome to Enrichment for the Real World, the podcast devoted to improving the quality of life of pets and their people through enrichment. We are your hosts, Allie Bender.
And I'm Emily Strong.
And we are here to challenge and expand your view of what enrichment is, what enrichment can be, and what enrichment can do for you and the animals in your lives. Let's get started. Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Enrichment for the Real World. And I want to thank you for rating, reviewing, and subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hi there, folks. It's MaryKaye here. You might be wondering who I am. So let me tell you that I am one of the behavior consultants on the Pet Harmony team. And today I want to talk to you about something called Grumble and Growl zones. That can sound like a very scary thing. Ooh, Grumble and Growl zones, right? But I'm hoping by the end of this episode that you will be able to do some of the following things. First of all, I want you to be able to accurately define what a Grumble and Growl zone is, and I want you to be able to differentiate between the two. Secondly, I would want you to be able to imagine and or take a walk through your house and be able to identify where they exist in your home. And then finally, I want you to be able to not only determine if there are things you can do about the Grumble and Growl zones that exist in your home, but I also want it to empower you to make informed decisions to help you keep everybody in the household, including your pets and perhaps, if you have children in the household. I want you to be able to feel like you can support and keep everybody safe. We're going to talk about things like management, creating pet-friendly spaces, and why getting curious about your pet's behavior will really help you problem solve solutions. I want you to be able to look at this through the lens of curiosity as opposed to the lens of either despair or frustration when possible. Before I jump into the definitions of Grumble and Growl zones, I want to give credit where credit is due. I didn't come up with the terminology of calling something a Grumble or Growl zone. I actually learned the phrase from Jen Shyrock over at Family Paws Parent Education. And when I was going through my coursework, I learned about this concept of Grumble and Growl zones, and I thought it was so incredibly brilliant because it's such a simple way to identify spaces in your home that might become problematic for a pet and somebody encroaching on that space, that I started adopting the language myself. So shout out to Jen and the incredible staff over at Family Paws. Like I said, I didn't come up with this terminology, but I sure do use it in consultations almost every single day. The other thing is that it's just really important that once you learn about Grumble and Growl zones and you know how to identify them, it's almost impossible to not see them. Everywhere you look, you'll start seeing them, and you'll have bells going off in your head about, okay, this is an identified space where we could run into trouble. What can I do to help address it? Also, this is something that while I'm going to focus mostly on kids and Grumble and Growl zones today, I want you to be aware of the fact that this is applicable to all species, no matter what species you share your home with. So it's applicable to birds, bunnies, cats, dogs, obviously. All species have spaces where they might feel more concerned about. And so while we're talking about kids and dogs mostly today, it's good for you to identify this across the board and just be like, oh, maybe this is why my pet is acting this way in this space. So I wanted to identify what Grumble and Growl zones are before we jump into the other parts of this episode. Let's start with Grumble zone. So a Grumble zone is a crowded space and often there is not an escape route. So that means that the pet cannot navigate the space easily with ease, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. There can also be forced proximity between your pet and anything else that might be a stressor for them in the environment. So it might be that they're closer to something than they want to actually be, but they can't navigate the space because it's a tighter space. And they might feel some conflict about moving away. So what that looks like is they may be in a space and they may be sharing it with, let's say, a trusted caregiver. They can move away because there's space to do it, but they don't want to because they want proximity to that trusted caregiver. So there's some conflict about actually moving away, even though they might be able to physically do that. A growl zone is a crowded space without a clear escape, and this is the important piece, folks, and or there's a resource nearby. A resource could include things like a toy, it could be a bone or a chewy thing, it could be treats, it could be their food bowl. It could also be a preferred resting spot. So think of their dog bed or their kitty bed or a couch that they prefer resting on. And the other thing that it can be is a preferred caretaker. Again, they want to stay near the caretaker that they have a bond with, and so they choose not to move away. With a growl zone, the suite of behaviors you will see will usually escalate to something like a vocalization, like a growl, or maybe a snap or a snarl, or sometimes it can even lead to a bite. Like I said, once you see them, you can't unsee them. You will see your pet go up their ladder of escalation. We have a couple of really great episodes about ladders of escalation and what to look for, and also ladders of de-escalation and what to look for. So make sure you give those a listen. We'll link them in the show notes. With a grumble zone, some of the examples I want to give you for grumble zones can be things like your dog's or kitty's crate, underneath kitchen tables or dining tables, are also a really good example of what a grumble zone can be. If you have a coffee table in your family room, and it's usually coffee tables and family rooms are positioned in a way so that it's close to the couch where you can reach over and put down a beverage, and there's very little space between where the couch ends and the coffee table begins. So that space between the couch and the coffee table is a perfect example of what a grumble zone can be. Any tight hallways, so let's say you're upstairs and you have typically hallways with bedrooms on either side of the hallway, those spaces can be very tight, and so there's less ability to navigate that space comfortably. Foyers are another really good one, so entryways into homes where there's less space in that area. And then staircases, another one that people may not think about, but when you think about navigating a staircase, there's very little space to move on a staircase. You're going up, you're going down. If a dog is resting on the staircase and someone is trying to maneuver around them, that dog might feel trapped, even though they're not. They might feel trapped. And they might have feelings about someone encroaching on that space. And then any area where a preferred caretaker is and the dog wants proximity to them. I see this happen quite a bit with my clients who have families and who have dogs and kids. It doesn't make sense to the caretakers in the home. They don't understand why their dog, they're like, but they could just move away. They can just move away from the baby as they're crawling towards them. The dog may not want to, or the kitty may not want to move away because they want proximity to the preferred caretaker. They have that bond. They're comfortable near that person. They see that person as a safe space. And so they may just want proximity to that person. And so they don't move away, even though they have space to do it. For growl zones, it would be any of those things that we just discussed, but we would have the addition of a resource that the pet is trying to have in their possession still. We want to be really careful as we're moving through our spaces and looking at things. I want to give you an example of one of the cases that I worked on. This is a couple of years back, but the family had this gorgeous baby grand piano. three kids, their dog would go, it was in a separate space, so it was in the living room in this house, and the dog loved to go under this baby grand piano and hang out underneath the grand piano. It was a quiet space. They could get away from the hustle and bustle of the household. They liked the coolness underneath. It was dark. It felt like a really safe space for this dog. When they started having children, I don't know if it's because the children were interested in the dog being under the piano, or if it was like, ooh, that's a cool place to be. I guess I'll go under there too. But again, the dog was able to navigate that space. They had an exit point. However, the exit point got blocked by the child's entry into the space, and so we had conflict underneath the piano because there was not a clear path for the dog to move away. Plus, it was already a space that this dog was comfortable in, and so we had to kind of rethink what that space was going to be, what that space was going to look like, and what it would function as for this dog. And we set up management to help this family navigate that situation. Some step-by-step instructions that you can follow to help you navigate these grumble and growl zones are the very first thing that I always work with clients on, and one of the most important skills I think that any behavior consultant can impart to the people that they're working with is to learn their dogs or their pets' ladder of escalation and de-escalation and their body language. It seems like a simple enough skill, but there are so many nuances to body language that it's really important to have someone help you navigate what is important and what you can dismiss. I think all body language is important, and the twitch of an ear can speak volumes. So we want to make sure that everybody in the household is understanding how their pet communicates, so that we can make decisions based on their levels of comfort or discomfort and make good decisions based on that. The other thing that I always work with families on is management strategies. So we want to use management as effectively as we possibly can. Never go into a home that has children, and young children, especially under the age of, like, let's say 5. I never go into a home where especially if there's conflict in the home. We're going to be talking about baby gates, and I'm going to ask people to get really comfortable with the idea of using that as a management strategy so that they can feel better and safer about everybody being in the house and it being a harmonious atmosphere for everybody. Baby gates are not a failure. Management is not a failure. It is a very effective strategy for being able to live your life without as much stress. So I am always going to encourage you to work with a professional so that they can help you determine what management strategies will work in your individual household. We also talk a lot about creating a safe space where no one will disturb the pet when they're there. So again, in the case of the piano, that was going to be retained as that pet's safe space. It was a pretty simple fix. We added a baby gate to the threshold. There was only one entryway into that room. We added a baby gate, so it was a child-free space for the dog to be able to go and still have this place that he had already determined he felt safe and comfortable in. And then we would just keep the kids away from that space while the dog was resting there. Problem solved. Not all problems are that simple to solve, but that was an easy one, and we'll take those wins, right? So creating a safe space where your dog or your pet can be without a lot of hustle and bustle and activity around them is going to be another really great step for you to take. Thinking about where your pet likes to rest already can be a really great first step to figuring out what that space might be. Don't pick a space that is central to the household. So if you have a household that is super busy and the pet's preferred resting space is on the couch, but your child is cruising furniture and navigating that space, it's not going to really function as a really great safe space. So again, working with a professional can help you set up a safe space that will function at like what it's intended for your pet. And then also sometimes grumble and growl zones exist because of the way our furniture is arranged in our home. Again, think about a couch with a coffee table put in front of it. We do that out of convenience. It's because, we want the coffee table there so that we can rest our beverages and our snacks on it while we're sitting around watching the kids play or watching TV. But it does create that situation where if the dog gets between that couch and that coffee table, and maybe they're there because you're sitting there and they want you to give them chin scritches, but then you have a toddler who's cruising around that coffee table, then you have the potential for conflict around that space. So sometimes just moving that coffee table out a few feet is all you need to do in order to make the space feel safer for everybody. So common tips and mistakes that people might make that I want you to think about is for you to first of all do a walkthrough of your house. Just walk through the house and kind of try to notate where there's the potential for a grumble and growl zone to exist. Look for those tight spaces. Look for tighter hallways. Look for spaces that might not have great lighting, because that can be a grumble and growl zone too. If you have a pet that doesn't see well in darker spaces, that might function like a grumble and growl zone. So do a walkthrough. Just go through, notate, make a notation of where in your house you think that potential for a grumble and growl zone exists. Also, I don't want you to assume that your pet will navigate the space the same way that humans navigate a space. So we have pretty high executive functioning skills, and what we know we need, how we need to move our body through space may look very different than how your dog navigates their body through space. If they have something that's blocking their path, they may not realize that they can take 3 steps back and 1 step to the right and get out. So don't assume that just because you can see a way for them to escape a space that they're going to view it the same way, and then plan accordingly. And also don't assume that because your dog is quote unquote fine, your dog is comfortable. We have a wonderful blog post called, I think it's called "Fine is the Worst 4-Letter Word." And fine first of all, how do we define fine? How do we define that word? What might be fine for one person isn't fine for another. We can't ask our pets if they're really and truly fine. And most of the time when people think their pets are fine, they really aren't. That goes back to that conversation that you should be having about body language and how your pet communicates, so that you can read the nuances of their communication. It is not the same as a human's communication, and we really need to be able to have the knowledge that we need in order to make determinations about whether or not our dog or pet is feeling fine. We're going to go back to the management not being a failure. We use management all the time. It is used to keep everyone safe, just like you would not have a 2-year-old with free access to underneath the sink where there's a bottle of bleach or cleaning supplies. We don't want to have an environment that isn't safe for everybody else in the home too. So just like child proofing, using management is a strategy that can keep everybody safe, but also protect your own mental well-being, because management is going to help free up your ability to not have to focus on every single little detail. And then be proactive about where your dog's chosen resting spots are, and make sure that they remain child-free as much as possible, so that we don't have, again, conflict around those areas. Some suggestions for you to evaluate or actionable things that you can do is just start learning your pet's way of communicating. Observe their body language. Look for signs of comfort. Look for signs of relaxation. What does it look like when they are at baseline and neutral about something, versus what do they look like when there's a stressor in the environment or a potential stressor in the environment? How does their body language shift? Again, it can be so subtle. It can literally be the twitch of an ear. Sometimes dogs whisper before you hear a whole lot of other ruckus. So learning low-level signs of stress in your pet and what that looks like is going to be a really good skill for you to focus on. And observe whether or not your dog is able to navigate the spaces in a different way. If you move furniture out, or you move it to a different location, you make a pathway clearer, those things can help your dog navigate the space better. I think it's also something that might be worth investigating to teach them the skill of how to navigate that space. Okay, you can come in this way, you can go out this way. Teaching them that skill might go a long way towards them knowing that, but don't take it for granted, because again, if there's a preferred resource nearby, they may not want to navigate the space anyway, because they might just want to stick around. And then giving your dog control and agency over their own safe space can go a long way towards helping that safe space function in the way that we want it to. It's very different for dogs or other pets to be able to choose where they want to rest within reason and if it's safe for them to do so, as opposed to us choosing it for them. There are things that we can do to help build a safe space if that's not their preferred spot, but talk to a professional about that so that they can help you on that path. So, to recap, learn your pet's body language, use management effectively, create a safe space, and move or arrange furniture in your home in a way that helps those spaces be more easy to navigate. Thanks for joining me today. If you would like to share videos of you trying this activity with your pet, you can join us on Instagram, share on Instagram at Pet Harmony Training, and hope to see you around soon. Take care.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if there's someone in your life who also needs to hear this, be sure to text it to them right now. If you're a pet parent looking for more tips on enrichment, behavior modification, and finding harmony with your pet, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Pet Harmony Training. If you're a behavior training professional dedicated to enrichment for yourself, your clients, and their pets, check us out on TikTok and Instagram at Pet Harmony Pro. As always, links to everything we discussed in this episode are in the show notes. Thank you to Ellen Yoakum for editing this episode and making us sound good. Our intro music is from Penguin Music on Pixabay. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. That helps more pet lovers and professionals find us so they can bring enrichment into their world too. Thank you for listening, and here's to harmony.